Good afternoon to all our listeners and those who are viewers. This is Coach Z with the Then and Now, and I have a great guest today. And after I do my little introduction about other things, but we have Greg Vitello here, who is a Hall of Fame human being, first of all, and a Hall of Fame coach from the Smet. 46 years Coach Vitello was over at the Smet, and he's got some great stories, and we're going to talk about it. But before we get started, I want to have a little shout out. This shirt that I'm wearing here, my grandson, Jake Brown, had this made for me. He made it himself, actually. I don't know how he did it, but because he's a lot smarter than me. However, Jake is really the reason why I have this podcast, and I want to just shout out to him. When the radio station shut down, Jake said, "Pop, you've done an awful lot for me, and I'd like for you to continue doing the podcast." And so he's the one who set this whole thing up and takes care of it,
How cool is that?
financially and
Yeah.
everything, which is unbelievable. I'm very lucky. And then my youngest grandson is just sitting over here. He's a Smet, going to be a sophomore, and I wanted him to come here today so he could really learn something about the Smet, because he doesn't know a damn thing about it. All he knows is what's going on today, and there's a lot before today. Am I right, Coach?
Oh, a lot. Yeah, just a lot.
So, there's just a few things. I want to shout out to Rotisserie Chicken. It's a really good place, and they're not giving me any money to say this. He's just a good friend of mine, Drew Sterling. He's got a great product there. And then Tully's Tap Room, that's a little pub right by my house that I spend too much time at, but I'm going to shout out to them too. But now all that nonsense is over. Hello, Coach Vitello.
Hi, how you doing, guys? Yeah, this is great.
We're going to have a lot of fun today. Let's just talk a little bit about the beginning and how you got started in athletics with Vic, and I always say this, Vic Sarkasia?
Sarcia. Vic
Sarcia. Vic
yeah.
Okay, tell me about Vic.
This is when I played ball in the Little League and Legion ball and all that other stuff, it was just kind of play ball. There wasn't a great deal of coaching going on in those days. It was kind of like you coached yourself. We coached ourselves simply because we played baseball every single day. If it wasn't playing long toss catch, we were playing what we call 500, where you'd either have to pick up a ground ball or a fly ball, and a fly ball was worth 100 points and a ground ball was worth 25. And as soon as you got to 500, you got to be the hitter. But we did this every single day. We could find a couple of guys that would want to play a game. We'd put our bikes in the outfield and say you had to hit on one side of the bike, and if you hit on the other side of the bike, you were out. But it was playing baseball every single day. So you kind of learned on your own. But Vic Sarcia was really the first guy that was my first true coach. He was a guy that was willing to break the game down to guys in Little League and in Legion ball. In other words, how to throw. I mean, how many guys really learned, for as old as we are, how many guys actually showed you how to throw a baseball or how to catch a baseball, how to hit? That was Vic. He was able to teach the fundamentals of the game, and he was one of the few guys that did it. And I was so thankful for that because really it helped my game. I wasn't a great player, but it helped my game. But again, he was the first guy that really actually coached baseball.
Well, that's awesome. And also you had another guy over there, I guess maybe this is when you worked at Benedictine, Tom Caldwell?
Tom Caldwell. Tom Caldwell came from Louisiana. He was a basketball coach, and he was a basketball coach. Knew nothing about soccer. And I went to school with just a ton of guys from St. Louis. The soccer roster at St. Benedict's was all St. Louis players except for two guys. I was from Chicago, and we had another guy from Venezuela. But Tom Caldwell came up to St. Benedict's in Atchison, Kansas. He was a graduate of St. Benedict's. And at the time, the deal was if you come here, you're going to be the assistant basketball coach. But to take that job, you had to be the soccer coach. And he had never seen a soccer game before in his life. Matter of fact, I've got the original book that he was given, all right, to basically put together drills and find out what soccer was all about. But the thing about Tom Caldwell, it wasn't so much his coaching method. It was what he taught you how to be a man. And I was so thankful for that because, at that time, that wasn't a big thing. The mental part of any sport wasn't very big in the 60s. But this is when he introduced that to us to figure out, hey, not only do you what you do on the field, but what you do on the other side of the line. That was Tom Caldwell.
Well, the mental part of the game is really important,
Oh,
Coach.
it really is.
I'll tell you what. You finished there, and then when you graduated, I think you told me that you come straight to St. Louis right afterwards.
I did.
You said you weren't really a soccer player because you
No,
were a
I was a
goalie.
goalkeeper.
You were
Exactly.
goalkeeper, right?
But the guys I went to school with said, if you want to coach soccer, I wanted to coach soccer and baseball. And they said, if you wanted to coach, you got to come to St. Louis because I wanted to go back to Chicago. And so they said, you got to go to St. Louis. So I came in and I interviewed at the Hazelwood School District. And at the time, they had science openings. I was a biology teacher also. They had science opening, but they had no coaching. And I was kind of disappointed. And as a result, I was staying with a close friend who I went to school with at St. Benedict's. He was much older than I was. He was 3 years older than I was. And he told me about his sister was the principal at Visitation Academy. And he contacted her and he said, hey, my buddy's in town, had an interview at Hazelwood. And she said, there's a brand new Jesuit school right down the street from us. She said, I know nothing about this place, but you might want to give it a try. I got a phone number. I talked to the president of the school. And as a result, the following week, he comes up to Atchison and we have a brief talk in the student union. And all of a sudden, he presents me with a contract. And he says, you want to teach at the Smet? And I said, I sure do. So that was it.
Well, and then heck, when you started at DeSmet, you coached a bunch of different sports. Coach, before you hit, and we'll talk about when you hit the lottery with the soccer and baseball. But talk about the other sports that you coached.
Well, one of the deals was if I'm going to come in, they needed a freshman football coach, and I said, hey, you know what? Just point in the direction that I need to go. Under the leadership of a guy by the name of Tom O'Keefe, who was just a fantastic individual who left the Smet and ended up at John Burroughs and had a fantastic career there. But Tom was my mentor. We lived pretty close together, went to school together almost every single day. But again, he gave me the fundamentals, of coaching. And I loved football. I really did. I mean, I was a big Bears fan when I lived in Chicago. So I felt like I knew a little bit about the game, but I didn't know how to coach it. And that was Tom. Tom showed me how to coach football.
Well, see, when I ended up being the freshman football coach at Ladue, I started off as the assistant freshman coach under Jerry Mayer.
Okay, yeah.
And then when Jerry went up to the varsity, they turned that over to me, and I had it for 30 years, 30-year freshman. And I learned everything about coaching. It's like you just said, Coach. Jerry Mayer and Ed Velton, those two guys, everything that I knew, they taught me. And then I just tried to refine it, and try to do my own thing.
Right.
But Ed Velton, let's talk a little bit about Velton. He was good friends with Bob Christian.
He sure was.
And I'll tell you what, Velton told me this. He said that him and Christian, they were good buddies,
Yes.
And so the schedule that Bob Christian had when he was coaching. He wasn't just happy with the Catholic League. He wanted to go play East St. Louis.
Right.
And go up and play Jeff City,
right,
and go up to Rockhurst. And Velton said to him, he says, I'm telling you right now, Bob, you're gonna schedule yourself right out of a job. Talk a little bit about that, Coach.
I don't know if he scheduled himself out of a job, but he was right. Bob wanted the ultimate in competition, and when we coached together for 5 years, and again, another mentor to me. Again, not only Tom O'Keefe, but Bob Christian taught me how to coach, how to be a coach. But I guess if you're talking about making a mistake, Bob's mistake was he was overzealous with his scheduling, and our talent didn't quite match up with some of these other schools that we were playing. And what was happening week after week is our guys physically were getting worn down. And when you got to come up against these guys week after week, we just weren't able to match up with them. And, excuse me, by the end of the season, it really showed. Our guys pretty much were beat up, and we really couldn't handle that schedule.
Well, that's exactly what I thought, and you certainly confirmed it. When you're playing those kind of schools and you're a high school football team and you maybe have 40 kids on your roster, maybe, I don't know, 45, and you're playing Jeff City, they got 80, 85 kids and
Right.
all those schools, you're going to get hurt and you're going to have injuries. And by the time you're in the 7th or 8th week of the season, you are, like you just said, Coach, you're beat down.
Right.
But I love Bob Christian, and I loved Friday nights with Bob Christian when we were we were having so much fun. We used to officiate high school basketball together, and Bob Christian and his buddy Jack Ball and that group of guys. And even Ray Cliff used to join us once in a while. We had so much fun we had more fun after the games than during the games, Coach. And Coach, you were over at the Smet at the scorers table.
Yes.
And you had your this is unbelievable. His son, who's now the manager of the San Francisco Giants, used to sit underneath the scorers table with you with the packed house. There was no place for him to sit when he was a little guy.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
No, really. In the Stepanovich years, you couldn't get a seat. They had to turn people away. I think this was kind of like the first in the St. Louis area where gyms actually had to be shut down because of the capacity. And it was the Creve Coeur police. They made sure that we weren't taking in more people than we could handle. But to find him a decent seat so that he could see, the best place was underneath the scorer's table right between my legs to watch these games. And he loved it. And for the most part, most people didn't even know he was under there. But again, he'd tell his friends, hey, I saw a great basketball game from the floor.
I was really honored, too. When Rich took the job over at the Smet, we had known each other for quite a while, and he called me one day, and he said, could you come over to the Smet? And I went over to the Smet, and he said, listen, we're going to be playing some really high-end teams over here. We're going to play the best of the best. And he says, I need good officials. And he said, we don't have a scheduler yet. That conference didn't have any. So the schools just got their own officials. He said, would you get the officials? So I got all the officials for Rich for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years over there. And I had the St. Louis U High game one night, and they locked the doors. Well, they saw me, and they're gonna let me in. And then there was a lady, and I'm not making this up. There was a window. It was a real warm February night, and there was a lady. She was really pissed off because they wouldn't let her in, and she was crawling through the window, Coach, to get into that building. It happened, doesn't it?
It did. I can't tell you how many times someone would come up to me at the scorer's table and say, hey, so-and-so's at the back door over here, and he said that if he showed up and just mentioned your name, you'd get him in, and I'd have to get up from the scorer's table and go let this guy in the back door. But again, it was great. It really was. I don't see that now in high school sports.
Not at all. Let's talk about that, because you were a state champion, I think 5 or 6 times in soccer, and a state champion in baseball also. And you and I had this conversation some time ago about the kids who are playing this club stuff and this and that, and they're missing the high school experience. Talk a little about it, Coach.
Yeah, for some reason, and again, because of my situation, I'm a high school coach, and I see these kids every day in the classroom, and this is part of their life, high school athletics. And when you get to school in the morning and you're sitting in homeroom and you're talking about, hey, how about that game last night that we played against CBC, and maybe you lost or maybe you won, but it was a fantastic game. And, guys are all wrapped up in stuff like that. And then you got the guy that says, well, I got some club games this weekend, and we're going to travel to Dallas, and we're going to be there the whole weekend. And, last weekend we went to Colorado to play, and I played like 20 minutes in 4 games, and it was kind of a wasted trip for me. And we had 12 people in the stands. That is not a high school experience to me.
No, it's not. And I had something written down here. I want to see if I have it right here. How many? Over 100 DeSmet athletes under your tutelage got Division I scholarships. Unbelievable.
Probably even maybe a little bit more than that.
More,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that the total though of
Uh-huh.
Division 1, 2, or 3, you were up in the
Yeah.
200 to 300 number
hmm
of kids. Think about that, Coach.
But again, it was the kids themselves. I was very fortunate. I was blessed to be at the Smet and coach some really neat kids. I coached some fabulous athletes. I also coached some kids that weren't fabulous athletes that were just simply willing to buy into your system to be role players. And I think the success of the teams that I was able to coach there, that success was really based on those role players, kids that were willing to do whatever was necessary for the team. And I think that is kind of lost a little bit now in high school athletics. It's kind of like, hey, I got to do my thing because I got to get to the next level. I'm using high school as a stepping stone to get to the next level rather than, hey, high school is my life. This is what I live for.
I couldn't agree with you more, Coach. I don't know. I just don't understand. Let's talk a little bit about a guy who was, and this is a perfect example of a guy who worked his tail off to have the great success. First, we'll talk about his father, Bill Mueller
Yeah,
Sr.
Bill Miller Sr.
Talk
Yeah.
about Bill
Yeah.
Sr.
What an extremely, I want to say, unusual individual. This guy, if you sit down and talk to him, he'd get into religion with you. He'd get into sex with you. He'd get into politics with you. I mean, it was anything and everything. But his big thing, it was baseball. And he had just a gazillion baseball stories. But again, he was a guy that was just a fundamentalist for baseball. We worked together for 15 years, and it was 15 of the best years of my coaching experience simply because he was all about the kids. There was nothing about me. It was about how can we help these kids be better baseball players, but how can we make them be better individuals? Can we make them better friends? Can we make them better students? Once they leave De Smet, can we make them better students? Once they grow up and get married, can we make them great parents? This is what we were all about.
Well, see, I remember Bill. He was a member of our 1-2-3 club that we're both members of, and I remember him telling me the story about his son. And he was telling me that he says, you know, my young son Billy came up to me one day and he said, Dad, I want to become a switch hitter. And I said, well, how'd you handle that? Because, you know, Bill Miller Sr. knows a hell of a lot more about that stuff than Ron Zetcher. He says, well, he said, I told him I'll be glad to work with you. But the first time you show me any frustration, we're just shutting it down that day. And he said, there were days that we had to shut it down.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk a little bit about his son, Coach, and what his son did?
No, and you're exactly right. I think, well, first of all, Bill said that if you're going to become a switch hitter, we're going to kind of ease into competition. He really backed off on the little league thing for Bill. He said, you know, when I feel like you're ready, and you just mentioned frustrations, when I think the frustrations are gone, you know, then we're going to jump into, you know, some real type competition. So Bill was kind of held back. Little Bill was kind of held back just a little bit. And I think for the most part, little Bill kind of resented that because, you know, again, you talk to your friends and they're all playing ball and you're basically working in the driveway because that's what they did. They had a driveway right next to their house. And besides taking, you know, a gazillion ground balls every day, you know, they worked on hitting with a tee and a screen and various things like that to basically make sure that, you know, once little Bill decided, hey, I'm going to get into competition, I'm going to be ready for this competition.
Well, you know, you told the story when you used to, on a cold early March, and practice was almost over and you're hitting ground balls to Billy. Tell the story,
yeah,
Coach.
Practice, we're done. We're done with practice. And it's getting dark.
Cold.
It's cold. And at the time, our infield wasn't great at the time. Right now, De Smet's got an all-turf infield. We had an all-dirt infield. And at the time, you know, this is early spring. It wasn't in great shape. But Bill's thing, little Bill, was, hey, Coach, can we do the 100-ball drill? And I went, you know, I'd kind of roll my eyes and say, okay, let's do it. And the 100-ball drill was I'd hit Bill 100 ground balls. But if he missed one, if maybe he missed number 65, he wanted to start again. So we did this a number of times.
Oh, Coach.
And I'm rolling my eyes and I'm thinking, Bill, I'm tired. I've been here for 12 hours. I want to go home. It's getting dark. But the look in his eye is, hey, I just want to get better. I want to be a better ball player. That's the thing that makes you as an individual and a coach want to say, hey, let's keep going. We're going to keep doing this until you want to stop.
That's how you make it to the bigs. And maybe, guess what? You become an American League batting champ.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Unbelievable. His dad told me also that when they were young, when he was young, Dad was still an old man like you and me. But anyway, he would take a handball into these elementary school gyms. I guess his dad had access to a lot of the Catholic schools, and he'd throw these handballs on the ground to Billy to get his hands. And the kid had great hands, didn't he, Coach?
Yeah, no, he was fortunate enough. I think they went over to Pattonville High School.
Well,
they were able to get in over there because they live really close. As a matter of fact, I think the Pattonville folks were kind of a little upset that why isn't this kid at our school? How come he's at a different school? But no, I think Bill, he just used every little thing, little knick-knack that he could, to make young Bill, a better ball player.
Well, look at young Bill, of course, had a great baseball career, and then he's a smart guy. I mean, what has he done since then, Coach? I mean, he's been in the big leagues as not a general manager, but he had a couple big-time jobs.
Yeah, he was assistant general manager out in L.A., and it was kind of like baseball 101 for him. He did all kinds of crazy things. He talks about going down to the Dominican Republic and checking out players. And he told me a story one time. He went down there and he said, I'm all set and I drive out to this field and I'm watching these kids. He says they were 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids and they weren't very good. And he said, I'm kind of looking around and finally I find the organizer. And he said this at the time, Bill was with the Dodgers. And the organizer says, you want to see the real players? And Billy says, yeah, that's why I'm here. He says, well, that's going to cost you. So it was a few $1,000. He had to call back to the Dodgers and say, if I want to see the real players, we got to buck up here. So that was one of his stories, down in the Dominican Republic.
Well, listen, right now then, I want to talk about your son.
Okay.
And I know he's your pride and joy.
He is. I'm no longer Greg.
But before we really get into it, I saw your son when they won the national championship. I wasn't watching the game, but I saw the replay, and I saw this guy running around that baseball field like I've never seen. What the hell's wrong with this guy? I know they just won it, but he's wild. He's throwing ice into the stands, and I said, "Is that Greg?" No, it's his son. It's just like you. It's unbelievable.
Well, I think that's what endeared him to the people of Tennessee, is that he was a people's person. He wanted to share his joy with the folks around him. And first it was his family. We all got to, hug each other and cry. But then next it was the people from Tennessee. Not only his players, but the people that showed up for these games. When he first started at Tennessee, that first game that he played at home, it was raining. It was about 38 degrees. And I counted, there were 28 people in the stands.
28 people.
28 people. And that's kind of where the baseball program was at that time. It basically was non-existent. And, when he finished there, you couldn't get a ticket. But as it grew and grew, people jumped in behind him. They liked the way he operated. He was personable. When he interviewed, not only for the media, but when he talked to people on the street, he was genuine. He's still that way. He still just basically talks matter-of-factly.
Just like his dad.
Yeah, there's not a lot of coach speak when he talks, and I think people appreciate that. And he built this trust amongst people at Tennessee. And I think that championship game simply was a way for him to thank those people for standing behind him.
Well, see, and I'm going to back up a little bit, then we'll come back. But when I saw him running, it brought back a memory of mine. Many, many years ago, I had a baseball game over at the Smet, and they were playing St. Louis U High. And the gentleman sitting across from me here, he was a baseball coach at the Smet. He was a third base coach.
And the only coach.
And I was a plate umpire, and we had a bang play at home plate, and I called it a Smet kid out. And oh my goodness, this man, just like his son, he came running down that third base line like a 100-yard dash, and I said, "Hey, stop, enough." And he says this to me, and I'm a Jewish guy, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but he says, "Oh, well, Mr. Zetcher's here. Should I genuflex?" And I knew that wasn't good, so I said, "You're gone."
I was gone, yeah.
So anyway, he's coaching against St. Louis U High, and Stevie Nicola comes out, and he walks to home plate, and he says, "What did he say to get you dumped?" I said, "I don't know what it meant, but I told him Nicola, and I thought he was going to fall at home plate." But we had some fun those days, didn't we, Coach?
Did, man. We sure did.
You're a great coach.
No, and again, you mentioned that, but I had total respect for you and the jobs that you did. And I think the last time we talked on radio, we talked about you, and I watched you officiate not only in baseball but in basketball. And it was never about Ron Zetcher. It was always about the game. And I, as a coach, truly appreciated that because, nowadays I think some officials they want to be the show. And it just doesn't do the sport any good. But Ron Zetcher was never that way.
Coach, and it's great you said that. And I won't mention the official's name, but I had a big-time game at Purdue, and they were playing Indiana. And one of the officials, who will be nameless because I don't want to embarrass him, okay, looks at me, and we're at Purdue, and he says, "Coach Katie over there thinks this is his arena. Not tonight. It's my arena." And I thought, "Oh, okay." See, and that I could never respect that guy again. No. I just never could. It's just, are you kidding me? And when I retired, Bob Knight, my son-in-law, Andy Brown, he went out and he got a hold of every one of these coaches that I had officiated for in Division I and put together a scrapbook. They sent all kind of stuff with pictures and this. And Bob Knight, what he said, "I always enjoyed having you on my games because you never thought you were bigger than the game." And that's the ultimate compliment, Coach.
Exactly. No, and that was you, believe me.
Okay, now let's talk about your son out there in Frisco and tell me how it's going and what I look at the box score every day. I just love the fact. First of all, he's the only college baseball coach in the history of our great game who went from a college coach to a major league manager. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's totally right. With zero major league experience on any level, and when he first was hired, that was brought up time and time again. It seems to have kind of died down now. Once they're I think they're 90 games, into their season now. But I don't think it's gone quite like the management and maybe Tony thought it was going to go. They've got some pretty good players on this team. They got some really good players on this team. There's 4 or 5 guys on that team that are making $20 million and more a year that, for the most part, have really underachieved. And it's not so much they're not trying to underachieve, believe me, but it just hasn't worked for them. Their pitching hasn't come through like they thought it was. The relief pitching has not been very good. Some of the players that were kind of underachieving are starting to kind of come around a little bit now. Again, now that they're 90 games in the season. But it's kind of been a pretty neat trial for him. Again, you're dealing with a totally different environment than you are on the college level. On the college level, you can kind of hold guys a little more responsible for their actions simply because you kind of hold their lifeline in your hand. You're paying them and you recruited them And you can send them off anytime you want. You can't do this at the major league level. And, I told him one day, I said, maybe one of these days you might need to go Billy Martin on some of these guys. And he said, no, he says, that won't work in these days. No, you can't go Billy Martin on somebody anymore. You simply have to hope that these guys are going to come through and their stats are going to be the same that they are on their baseball card.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the veterans, like Devers, he's a big time veteran, and
Yes.
I wonder how those guys view a guy
Mm-hmm.
when they walk in the clubhouse and he's in charge of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to be a really strong personality like your son to be able to deal with that. Your ego, you got to put your ego aside.
Oh, definitely. And again, you handle these individuals much different than a college kid. All right. I mean, these guys are seasoned veterans. They pretty much know, what they're going to do from day to day. And for you to step in and say, hey, you know what, you need to do this and you need to do that, it doesn't work with those guys. It really doesn't. Matter of fact, I suggested one day, I said, you know what, the guy was in such a tremendous slump. I said, either have him bunt or have him hit and run every time he gets up. And he said, Dad, I can't do that. This guy's making $20 million a year. You just can't do that with those kind of athletes.
You can't. I remember years ago reading it was a great article on DiMaggio, and DiMaggio said, and this is what you're talking about. DiMaggio said that when he was in a slump, he tried to play pepper with the pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
That would make him just focus,
Right.
just try to hit it right back at him.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys won't do that today.
No, they won't. They really won't. I remember Whitey. I used to get to the meetings a little bit early, the 1, 2, 3 club meetings, and we used to talk about 2-strike hitting. And he said they don't practice it. Nobody practices that in spring training. 2-strike hitting. It's kind of like you take your swings, and if it doesn't work out, you walk back to the dugout, and you're still going to get your check no matter what. I know Billy Miller and John Mabry and I used to talk about 2-strike hitting when they were the hitting coaches with the Cardinals, and we get down to, finally, John Mabry said, you know what? They just don't care because, again, they're going to get their check whether they strike out or not.
Well, I'm a big Cardinal fan, and when I see the Cardinals, like last night, once again, their relief pitching, this fails them and so forth and so on, and I feel bad. And then I kind of think, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I think, don't feel too bad. I mean, those guys made a lot of money last night, win, lose, or draw.
They sure did.
Exactly. They're living a little better lifestyle than you are, Coach Zetcher. So, and it's the truth,
No, it is.
So, but Buster Posey really likes your son.
He does. Buster, he's a Georgia guy that played down at Florida State, but he's a regular guy. I kind of put him in the same class with Peyton Manning. My son's become very close with Peyton Manning.
Really?
And Peyton's a guy that we'd like to drive down to the Hive right down the street from here and have a few beers, and you wouldn't even know, what Peyton Manning's background was. Buster Posey is exactly the same way. He's a down-to-earth guy that just loves baseball. No.
Well, your son is very lucky to have him.
He is.
As his boss.
Yeah.
Basically, he is his boss. And it really doesn't matter what the sports writers
or
the talk show guys. As long as Buster's in your corner, you're in good shape.
Well, Buster's told me on a number of occasions, he said, first of all, I hired this guy because, one, I was tired of seeing the same old guy being the retreads. This guy went from one team to another team and another team. He said, I felt like I had a diamond in the rough. I felt like I had a guy who, one, he knows baseball, but he's able to handle people. He could get us to the next level. And again, I don't think it quite turned out like they thought their roster was going to be this year. They haven't quite, met expectations. But he said, I got the guys back. He said, I know what's going on. And he said, we're going to change the culture with this team. We're going to change this with Tony.
Well, I think they will.
They will.
I believe that. Let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about going back to the Smet.
Okay.
And the great coaches that you were with all those years, and just a brief word or two about each guy. I'll kind of mention them, and then you can kind of tell me. And if it's, we'll just start with Rich Grauer.
Yeah. Rich, for the most part, was extremely paranoid. He was always looking around thinking, who's sneaking up on me? Somebody's going to try to sneak up on me. But again, it was just his personality. And I think the reason that he was like that is because his ideas were just fantastic. I mean, he was a fabulous coach. I know for a fact that there were people that would just kill to play for this guy. And I think the guys that did play for him, I think they were just, they couldn't appreciate a guy more.
I echo everything you just said, and I refereed for Rich when he was at the Smet, and then I also refereed a lot of games when he was at St. Louis U, and I'll make this brief. He saved St. Louis University's basketball program. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. He saved it and was mistreated at the end. They were pretty damn successful while he was there, and Debbie Yao came in, and whatever her reason was, who knows what these people think, but Rich deserved better than what he got at St. Louis.
I think they went for a bigger name. I think they were looking for a guy that was going to come in and turn the world around. And Rich didn't turn the world around; he turned the program around, and he did it the right way. I mean, he went and hunted for players that not only could fit in academically at St. Louis U, but also fit in athletically.
Oh yeah, he got the cream of the crop in St. Louis.
He did.
He was getting all those guys. Well, anyway, and then we'll talk a little bit about Berge. He was Grauer's assistant for a while.
Yeah,
Berge. Yeah.
You talk about an in-game coach. I don't think there was a better in-game coach in the St. Louis area than Dale Bergman. He was very nonchalant in his approach to practice and just in team things, but boy, when it got to be game time, this guy was second to none. Really fun to watch.
Well, and then right before you, a guy that I really liked, and his dad actually scouted me when I was in high school, George Hasser Sr., and his son was a baseball coach over at the Smet before you. Am I right, Coach?
Yes, he was. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I got hired there, I told them I wanted to coach baseball, and they said at the time, we're not going to have a baseball team simply because we don't have a facility yet, and we're going to progress into it. And all of a sudden, George came up to me one day because actually we worked together. We coached freshman football together, and George came up to me one day and he says, "You know what?" He says, "I'm going to be a baseball coach." And I went, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I told him I'd work for nothing if they'd get me, the bare essentials," and they got him the bare essentials. And George was the baseball coach, for a few years there. But he had so many outside interests. With his second job and various things like that. His family was pretty large. And he told me every year, he says, "You know what, I'm going to get out and, you can take over." But again, just a first-class individual.
Yeah, and then the last guy, of course, we talked a little bit about him before, Bobby Christian. He's just quite a guy.
Oh, he was. No, my mentor taught me how to coach. I really enjoyed working with him for either 4 or 5 years. But Bob was our offensive guy. He gave me the defense and he just left me alone. He said, "Hey, you do it, okay? And I'm not going to say anything. Just do your thing."
He was a great singer.
He was.
He could sing it, and he didn't sing at any concert halls.
No.
He did most of his singing in taverns.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And it was great to be out with him because all of a sudden he'd be gone from the table, and I'd look around, and he'd be at some stage, and he'd be doing his thing.
Oh, he had the best time. I mean, there was a guy, and you know what? I met his son. I loved his son. I mean, Bob was Bob.
Oh, he was.
And he's missed. So is Ed Velton. All those guys, as time goes by, we lose a lot of them. But we haven't talked much about your baseball state championship team. Can you talk just a little bit about that year, Coach? It's a great honor and a great win. But before that, though, and I couldn't believe this, that you were in a state final prior to that, where a balk was called.
Yeah. That
the only person at that, and I talked to a lot of people who were there, by the way, spectators. The only person, and quite frankly, I don't think the other umpires also saw it. Only one person in that whole ballpark saw that balk.
Right, exactly.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was. And the thing about championship baseball on the high school level is that, you play with 2 umpires all year. And then you get to district finals and you get to sectionals and all that other stuff. And now all of a sudden you've got 4 umpires. So now you've got 8 eyes, on what's going on. And, a kid who's pretty much done the same thing all year, now all of a sudden somebody finds one little bitty thing that's wrong with something that the kid's done all year. And, it turns out to be a negative thing.
Well, Coach, am I right? Did that not end the game?
It pretty much did, yeah.
That was it, right?
That was it.
The winning run scored.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's a tie game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what? When I supervised basketball in the MIAA and the SLIAC, I told my officials, I can accept mistakes. I mean, we all make them.
Right.
I said, don't make a mistake at the end of a game that creates nothing but a problem. Right. I said, you've got to be smarter than that.
Exactly. Don't over officiate.
Don't over officiate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's first of all, to get 2 real good umpires on a high school game is a pretty good deal.
Oh, it sure is. It really is.
To get 4, I'm going to question it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Are all 4 of those guys really good umpires, or do you just need 4?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll rest my case.
I got you.
I rest my case. We've gone over, but I'm so happy we've gone over because this has just been an awesome, awesome time. And by the way, see this guy over here? It's my grandson, and he came here because he really wanted to meet Coach Vitello, and he's very shy. He doesn't really, but he better start speaking up, or I'm going to send him over to you for about a week, Coach. You'll get him straightened out.
He's doing fine, man. He's doing fine.
He's a great young man.
No, you tell me he's a fantastic student too. That's number one. That's the first thing. Is being a student.
My mom and dad told me that, Coach, for years.
Yeah,
it just never.
Mine did too. It didn't sink in.
Never sunk in here either.
No.
But guess what? We could tell good stories together.
We sure can, man.
I am honored to have you here today, and
my honor. Believe me.
This has just been fun. Thank you so much for coming.
No.
And if you people, when you get this, and it'll be on YouTube and Spotify sometime early next week when they do the editing and everything else. If you like it, put a like and then share it with your friends. I want everybody to really have the opportunity to hear Coach Vitello. He's got an awful lot to say. And all you young people here in St. Louis, you should really listen to this because you should play with your high school team, stay with your buddies, play with your neighborhood friends. All this other stuff, I'm an absolutely negative about all this club stuff. It just doesn't work.
I'm with you,
Mike
man.
Shannon was a pretty damn good athlete in St. Louis, and I don't believe he belonged in any clubs.
He did not, no.
He picked the bat up and he picked the football up. And
right.
He knew how to do it.
That's right. You got it, man.
Okay.
But thank you, too. My pleasure.
Okay. Have a great day. Today,
You too.
guess what, Coach? Today's the youngest we'll ever be.
Yeah, you got you, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.